في معنا very important workshop today. It's about importance of wills from Islamic and legal perspective with sister and attorney Maha Siyam, inshallah. تفضلي يا أستاذ. They can move out anyway. Yeah. Sit with her. You're okay. It's okay. You're fine. It's okay. Sit down. You don't have to start the video. It's okay.
Do I need it? Okay. Can you hear me? Do I need this? Okay. All right. Let me just move this. Zero. I don't want to hold it. I just
Okay.
wanna- yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. I think that's fine. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So I should sit? Okay. I don't want to sit right in front of you. I'm short. Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Maha Siyam. I'm a New Jersey licensed attorney, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance of wills from an Islamic perspective and from a legal perspective. So before we get into this topic, a lot of people get really uncomfortable when they talk about this because they think, I don't want to think about dying. I don't want to think about the day I die. They become very nervous or it's an emotionally heavy topic. So before we start, I just want you to shift your mindset a little bit about it and think of it more as preparation than thinking about it as something that's depressing, right? Because as Muslims, we know that this life is temporary and we're going to move on to the next one. And it's part of making your will is reviewing that emotional part of it, but it's also a spiritual preparation. So you're thinking about your legacy in this life, and you're thinking about your legacy for the hereafter. So before we start, I'm going to talk about it super generally from the Islamic perspective, and then I'm going to give you the New Jersey law perspective about it. So let's start with the Islamic perspective. So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 180, that if you have anything, that you should have a will and you should divide it fairly with your family. So, and the reason it comes up in the Quran is because making a will is super important for you to review what you want to leave in this world and what you want to leave for your next life, right? So having good deeds, having charity, you could put that as part of your will and it would count for the afterlife for you. So that's why it's mentioned in the Quran. Now, to give you a general perspective of Islamic inheritance laws and how they work, if you read Surah An-Nisa, you get to all these ayat that have so many fractions and so many different scenarios about how inheritance works. So if you think of your property as like one big pie, 2/3 of it is going to apply to those Islamic inheritance laws that you see in Surah An-Nisa, all those fractions and different scenarios. 1/3 of it is actually called wasiyah, which I know we use wasiyah to mean a will in general when we speak in Arabic, but wasiyah from an Islamic legal terminology actually refers to that 1/3 where you can do whatever you want. You can decide to donate it to the masjid, you can decide to donate to a school, maybe to your friends, to whoever you want. So mentioning of the will and how important it is not only found in the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us in his sunnah in hadith in Sahih Bukhari that Muslims should not sleep for 2 nights in a row without having their will done. So when you think about it, like, why does it come up so much? Why does it come up in the Quran in more than one surah? Why does it come up in the hadith? And the reason is because making your will is an extremely important part of your spiritual journey as a person on this earth and preparing for your legacy here and in the hereafter. But it's also about helping your family. I think we've all heard of a story about a family where maybe the parent didn't leave a will and the kids started fighting, they started arguing. Sometimes in the US, they sue each other and they go to court because they don't know what the parent wanted. So each person thinks, well, they would have wanted this or they would have wanted that. So when you have a will and you make those decisions, your kids, your family, they won't have anything to fight about. They have to respect your decision. Even if they agree, it's legally binding. So they just have to go with what you said. So that's also part of the wisdom of having a will in Islam. It's not only preparing you emotionally and spiritually for your afterlife, but it's also helping your family grieve your absence without fighting over it, right? So before we switch over to New Jersey law, I do want to mention that when I took a wills class, the lawyer teaching it said that when they were drafting inheritance laws for the United States, that they actually studied Islamic inheritance laws. And they took a lot of inspiration from Islamic inheritance laws when they were drafting the laws for this country. And one of the big takeaways that they took was regarding debt, dayn, when you owe money to other people. So in Islam, before you do anything with somebody's will, if they owe anybody any money, those people get paid back. And then whatever's left over goes through those 2/3 with all the fractions that we talked about, and the 1/3 where you chose whatever you wanted would go to whoever you wanted it to go to. In New Jersey, it's the same thing. If you owe anybody any money, if there's any creditors involved, they get paid back first. And then whatever's left over, they do whatever you said in your will, they follow that order. So that's really inspired by our deen, and it's sort of another signal for us to appreciate what we already have, that other people have to sort of go and find. But alhamdulillah, we already have it. So let's talk about New Jersey law. I'm going to give you 3 main reasons why you really need a will in New Jersey, not as a Muslim, but just as a person that lives in the United States. Everyone is supposed to have a will in the United States and in New Jersey specifically. If you talk to any attorney, any financial planner even, they always recommend that you have a will. So the first reason is to protect your assets and your finances. Now, what does that mean? When you have a will, you get to choose what you want to do with your assets and finances. You specify every single thing, and it happens the way you want it. If you don't have a will, the state will actually come in and make that decision for you. So instead of having the state literally divide it up in the way that they see fit or do whatever they want with it, you want to make that decision for yourself. And as a Muslim, the extra plus is you get to choose if you want to have Islamic inheritance laws apply to your will here in the United States. It's completely legal and it's completely your choice. So if you want to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, you actually have that freedom here to do so. The second reason is if you have minor children. So anybody who has kids under 18, you really need to have a will. And the reason is if, God forbid, something happens to both parents, or if we have a situation where there's one parent and one parent already passed away, it's even more important to have a will. Because in your will, you get to name a guardian for your kids. Now, the guardian is somebody that you trust. And what happens is when the parents, both of them, are out of the picture, that guardian actually has legal rights to protect your children, to take them, to care for them, and to become their new legal parent, really. So when you have that, you let your kids transition from your care to someone else's care, and you get to choose that person. If you don't have a will and you don't name a guardian, in worst case scenario, the state might actually take your kids until they can figure out who can take care of them. They might go through a foster system, they might go through a social worker until they see, well, which relative is the fit relative? Which one is the best place that we can put these kids with? So to avoid all of that, to avoid the kids being taken away, you need to just have a will, name that guardian. Their rights automatically kick in the minute your will is submitted. Even if the state doesn't take your kids, right? Sometimes both sides of the family want the kids. Maybe the mom's side of the family wants to take the kids and the dad's side of the family wants to take the kids. Then you actually have a problem because they're going to start arguing. They might even sue for custody. And now the kids are literally back and forth in this legal battle instead of transitioning from something that's very sad and they're going through something very traumatic into all the family just fighting over the kids because they want to care for them, but now it's actually creating more problems instead of helping. So if you have a will and you name a guardian, everybody has to respect your decision because they're your kids. They can't argue about it, right? They just have to respect it. So you get to name somebody that you trust, somebody that you feel will love your kids, will care for them in the way that you see fit. So that's what's good about having a will for minor children. The third reason, which we touched upon in the first two, is to keep the state out of it. So we talked a little bit about the state being involved if you don't name a will for your assets and your finances, but let's get into more detail with that. If you don't have a will, they call it intestate, which means you don't have a will. So what they do is they appoint somebody to figure out what you have, what you don't have, what do you owe. And then if they're going through this process and if there's something complicated, they might hire a lawyer to figure out the complex legal issue. Now, who's going to pay these people? You are. Your property is. So what they do is they're going to figure out how much they spent on trying to figure out what to do with your estate, how much the fees that the state racked up in trying to figure this out. Then they appraise your property and they might sell whatever they need to sell and subtract whatever you technically owe them now because they spent a lot of time, they spent staff, they spent energy trying to figure out what to do with your estate because you didn't have a will and you didn't have all of these questions answered. So instead of getting that money to your family, instead of giving it to your loved ones, you end up actually paying the state to figure out what to do with your money when you should have just kept them out of it. And at the same time, while the state is figuring out, your assets are frozen. Nobody can access them, right? In that case. So if you have minor children, for example, like we said, with both parents not in the picture, the kids nobody will be able to use that money to spend on the kids or take care of them. It's just going to stay with the state until they figure everything else out. So to keep the state away from your money and to not pay them to literally do what you could have just done yourself, all you have to do is have a will, specify everything that you need, and they won't get involved. And we talked about the minor children, right? Nobody wants their kids to be taken away by the government. Nobody wants complete strangers to be around their kids. So to make sure that your kids transition from your care to the care of somebody that you trust, that you know will love them and care for them, you just have a will, you name your guardian, and that guardian's rights kick in and they can just take the kids and continue transitioning with them. Now, two more specific groups that I want to talk about that really need wills are converts and reverts is the first group that we're going to talk about. So a lot of us come from Muslim families. So when we think of a death or a funeral, we automatically know that it's going to go through an Islamic ritual, right? We're going to do the proper washing of the body. We're going to have a prayer in the masjid. We're going to have a burial in a Muslim cemetery. But if you're a convert or revert and your parents maybe are not Muslim, or your siblings are not Muslim, or even your spouse maybe is not Muslim, then you have the issue where maybe they don't even know that there's all these rules in Islam about how to bury your body or how to do a funeral. And they might turn to their own religion and their own traditions, which give them comfort to do your burial, to do your funeral, which you don't want. As a Muslim, you want to make sure that you're buried in the proper way that fits your deen. So when you have a will, you specify in your will, how do you want to be buried? Where do you want to be buried? And you put all those instructions in. So even if your non-Muslim family member has your will, they actually don't get confused. They don't get stressed out. They see that it's all laid out clearly for them and all they have to do is follow it. And this way you get the burial that you need to get and you're not putting stress on your family that maybe doesn't come from your religion, that wouldn't even know what to do in that situation. The second reason is if you're a convert and revert and you want to follow Islamic inheritance laws, right? You get that choice in New Jersey. You could choose to divide up in whatever way you want. And let's say you chose Islamic inheritance laws to apply to you because you're Muslim. What happens is, remember we talked about the property being like a whole circle. So those 2/3 that go through those fractions with Surah An-Nisa, they don't apply to non-Muslims. So if your parents are not Muslim, if your siblings are not Muslim, or your spouse is not Muslim, they actually don't inherit through that system. They sort of get removed from it. So, but what you have is that 1/3 that we talked about where you can do whatever you want with it. You can inherit your non-Muslim family through that 1/3 and it's completely allowed. it's completely okay. So, and that's the wisdom of having the 1/3 where you have full discretion and full choice on what to do. It actually protects your non-Muslim family members, and you're allowed to give whoever you want and however much you want. You're not bound by any rules or fractions. You can actually just choose how much you want to give your non-Muslim family. The second group I want to talk about is people who are going to Hajj. So if anybody's going to Hajj this year, congratulations. If you know anybody who's going to Hajj, then please share this information with them. We all know when we're going to Hajj, it's a big spiritual journey in our deen. It's a really big step. And we have to do preparation before we go. So Hajj is really a rehearsal for the Day of Judgment when you think about it. The way you're dressed, the rituals that go on in Hajj, they're all reminding us of what's going to happen at the end, right? So in order to prepare for Hajj, the first rule is if you owe anybody any money, you should pay it back before you go. If you hurt somebody's feelings, you should ask them for forgiveness. If somebody hurt you, you should forgive them. So you can go to Hajj with a clean, financial slate and with a clean emotional slate. The third thing that you should do when preparing for Hajj is to get your will done, because it helps you emotionally prepare for Hajj in that you get into that mindset of thinking about your afterlife, and it also helps you get your affairs in order, right? We talked about the legal perspective from the New Jersey side. When you have all your affairs in order and it's all laid out, now you're preparing yourself for Hajj because you're spiritually prepared, you're thinking about it, and you're also legally prepared. So that when you travel, if anything happens, you have your will done, but it's also part of your requirement in the Quran, and it's part of our requirement in the Sunnah. So you're abiding by those rules too. So just to recap, for converts and reverts, we said it's really important to have your burial mentioned in your will so that you make sure you have a Muslim burial, and you can give inheritance to your non-Muslim family through the 1/3 that is your choice, even if you choose Islamic inheritance laws. And for people going to Hajj, it's really important to get your will done as part of that spiritual, emotional, and legal preparation for such a big journey and such a big step. So I hope this was really beneficial, and I hope you guys understood the concept of why these two things mesh together, right? Our Islam sort of feeds into our legal rights as US citizens, and they go hand in hand with each other. They don't contradict, they actually complement each other very, very well. And we're lucky that, subhanAllah, our deen literally guides us on every part of our lives, how we eat, how we drink, how we make money. And this is just one more thing that we have guidance on in our deen to help us go through this life in the best way that we can. So inshallah, if this was beneficial for you, I would hope you share it with your friends and your family. If you have any questions, you can email me directly at mehasyam@gmail.com. My name is mehasyam@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. And I hope this was good for you guys and you understood why wills are really important. So make sure you get your wills done. Thank you. We're working online, so whatever you need, we could just talk online and we'll get it done for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does the other partner decide or the state decide?
No. If one of the parents is alive, the state doesn't get involved. The other parent takes the kids and that's it. But if both parents are not around,
Finance also.
it's, what do you mean?
Not just for the kids, but also the finance.
Well, no, that spouse's finances do have a will, and they do go through whatever they wanted. It doesn't automatically go to the spouse if that's not what they want. But the kids, if one parent is alive, the kids are not an issue. But the finances, it's always each individual has to have their own will about their own property. So it would happen the way they want. لازم الاثنين، بس الوصية إلك لحالك، لكن ما بيقدرش يبقى في وصية لاثنين مع بعض. So لأن في الناحية exactly لازم أنت تبقى عندك واحدة لحالك وهو عنده واحدة لحاله. So بس بتستعمل إذا اثنين مش موجودين. So بتتفقوا على مين بدكم تحطوا، بس بالنسبة لورقة قانونية كل واحد لازم يبقى عنده واحدة لحاله وموقعها لحاله ومسويها لحاله. It's not a joint thing. Oh, the question was, can a couple have one will together? And the answer is legally no. Each person has to have their own will individually done. It's not something you can do joint, but you can, as a couple, talk about it and decide what's the best fit for your kids and what you want to do and put the same terms in both wills. But legally, from a legal standpoint, it's only works for an individual, and it only works if you have your own legally binding will. I do want to add that please don't think that if you write your will at home and you sign it and you put it in your drawer next to your bed, that it's going to work. That's not legally binding in New Jersey. That's not legally binding in any state in the United States of America. If you want a legally binding will, there's actually a whole process to it. And there's like a whole will package that we have, for example, that's consisting of 5 different things. And there's a whole way of making it legally binding. If you write it at home and even if you sign it, it doesn't count. It's not a real will. So you have to talk to an attorney, and if you need help, I could answer those questions with that, but it's not going to be legally binding if you do it yourself. Yes.
If you're married, you only do a will on half of the assets, because half belong to that one spouse, half belong to the other, right? You can't do a will on all the assets.
You can do a will on whatever you own alone. So let's say most people own the house, like the house is with the name of both spouses, right? So when that happens in New Jersey, I'll just talk about New Jersey, we have joint tenancy laws. So if your spouse passes away, you end up owning the house by yourself. So you don't need a will for that, you don't need anything. If both people's names are on the house. But for everything else, like let's say a lot of Muslim and Arab women have a lot of jewelry, right? So that's yours, it's not your husband's. So if you have jewelry in a bank and it's in a little box, if you want it to go to the right people, you have to have a will and say who gets that, right? So that's something on
Okay, another question. So most businesses are in the name of the husband. So if Allah passes away, does the will go to half of the assets or all of it?
If the husband owns a company or a business, that's another reason why it's really important to have a will, because it won't automatically go sort of somewhere directly. Like if he has partners, then those partners still have their rights, but he is sort of removed from it. It becomes a lot more complicated. But with a company, yeah, it doesn't go automatically to like his wife or his kids or something like that. It becomes, because a company, under the way the US laws work, is a company, it's its own entity. It's like almost like a person in a way. So when you have a company, that's a whole different other process that you need to do to make sure that your kids, for example, get that share of the company in case something happens to you. If you have other partners or you have other shares in the company or something like that, it becomes a little bit more complicated than that. But yeah, it doesn't move as automatically as you think that it does. Yeah. Yes.
If you have a will, can anybody access it?
So when you have a will, you have to choose an executor for your will. So what you do is you actually have to give your executor, or you can keep it in your house, but tell that person where it is. So the original copy has to go to the executor, and you can keep a copy. And the way it works is you have to name an executor. An executor is usually someone you trust. It's somebody that you know will actually do what it says. So what they do is when the time comes, they know where it is, or you already gave them a copy that's original. They take it to the surrogate's office, and there's a lot more things that if you become a client, like I would explain to you what you do, but just to give you a general picture, you would take it to the surrogate's office and they would make sure it's authentic. And again, that's where the lawyer part comes in. We would have to do all that stuff so that when they show up, it's just approved. And that person makes all those decisions, and they have to follow what it says.
So if I want to find out if my brother has a will, is there a way for me to find out or no?
I mean, I hope you and your brother talk, and
He passed away, I don't know if he has a will or not.
oh.
Is it registered in the state anywhere?
No, it's not. It's not something that's registered in the state. Exactly. So if you have a will, when you work with your attorney, you're going to name an executor, you're going to name the guardians, you're going to name all these different things, and you're going to talk to those people. Don't do it in secret. Maybe they hate your kids. Maybe your kids are really bad, so they don't want them. So you have to talk to them and say, look, if something happens to me, would you be okay with taking care of my kids for me? If they say yes, then you say, okay, I'm putting you in my will. Okay, great. You have to have those conversations. Don't do anything in secret. And yeah, if you did your will with an attorney and you didn't tell anybody, you didn't tell even the person that you named as an executor, and they don't know where it is and they can't find it, then it's as if you never had a will at all, because the state doesn't get involved until the day that it needs to be submitted, right?
So it's not the job's attorney to find the people in the will and say.
No,
So
no.
what does the lawyer do?
So, well, the first thing the lawyer does is you're alive, right? So you have a will, so you come get one done. And then you tell all those people that are involved in it, right? We talked about the executor or the guardians. You let them know, especially the executor. They need to have access to the original copy. So that's done, right? Once that happens, you should have named an executor that you really trust, so they should be able to divide everything without a lawyer being involved. If a lawyer is getting involved in the aftermath, it means people are fighting, and it means somebody's saying, well, the executor actually isn't following the will, they're actually doing something else, right? Let's say it says to give my mom $500,000, and the executor is like, well, she's annoying, I'm gonna give her 200. That's where you get the lawyer in and say, look, the will says 500 and he only gave her 200. So technically, if you do everything right and everybody does what they're supposed to do, you shouldn't have a lawyer be involved in the after part, because that's going to waste a lot of money, it's going to waste a lot of stress. The whole point of the will is to save you money, save you stress, and save you time. The way that the lawyers get involved after the will, after the person dies, is means somebody's fighting over something. Yeah, because when you're the executor and you have the proper will, you get the legal rights to access the bank accounts, to access anything else that they need to access financially. It becomes a legal right. So they'll take it to the bank and they'll be able to do everything that they need to do. They shouldn't need anybody. But if there's a problem, then they need them. A lawyer can be an executor, yeah, you can do that. But I'm sure they're going to charge you. But yeah, you can do that. No problem. Anytime.